And though your active participation is definitely encouraged, you can simply choose to follow along without using the chat functions if you prefer. Please note that the chat is reserved for your answers to any questions that I might ask during the presentation. And I ask that we please respect that. It's reserved for that purpose only, not for any side conversations or perhaps material sharing that could be distracting to each other. So all that said, welcome to the content. For those who aren't entirely familiar with Microsoft Teams, which is the platform that we're using right now, you can type a message, so type in your answers to any questions I might ask using that chat box on the right-hand side. So if you click the little speech bubble icon, that's going to show you the chat box. And then right beside the speech bubble icon at the top to the right, there is a little bonhomme with his hand to his forehead, and it'll give you the options to raise your hand, laugh, clap, heart, and like. So just to orient you with the platform itself there. With regards to today's content, we're going to start by taking a look at the anatomy of the spine and its structures, and then we're going to talk about different forces that, oh, pardon me, for some reason, did someone request control of the presentation there? I think they did. Okie dokie. So that's just a little bit of a... Okay, I'll just, on that note, I didn't mention this, but I'll ask that the participants just refrain from requesting control of the presentation, because that will actually give you full control instead of me having control. So it'll change the slides without any of us knowing. So that's going to be the buttons on the top. So you were likely looking for the chat box or the raise your hand function. So the buttons on the left asking for control are the ones that I need to flip through the slides. So thanks for thanks for highlighting that for us. So after looking at, those different forces that can impact our spine, we're going to follow up with the strategies on how to actually reduce the risk of injury due to these forces. And that's going to include, posture strategies as well as specific strengthening exercises for our core, right? So to dive in, I think it's good to know a little bit about who's joining us today. And I'm going to ask a question. Who here has suffered from back pain that's lasted longer than 7 days, that's lasted longer than a week? So to answer yes, I'll get you to raise your hand. And please don't feel obligated to. This is only if you're willing to share, but I invite you to raise your hand if you've ever experienced back pain for longer than a week. I'm going to start by, raising my hand. I absolutely have. And we can see, or if you're not able to see, at least I can see that we've got a number of people raising their hands. So the majority of us, unfortunately, have experience with back pain management and injury prevention. And that's probably why we're here, right? It's either because we've experienced it before, or because we're aware of it, or we know someone who has. So what I'm going to do is just get you to lower your hand now. So it's going to be by pressing the same button that you did to raise your hand. So thanks so much for sharing. And with that, it leads me to my next question. What was the primary trigger for your last back pain? And even if you haven't experienced back pain for a long amount of time, you might have experienced it for, a few days at a time. Oh, sugar, I keep raising my hand. Sorry, guys. And some people can, really easily identify the cause of their back pain. And sometimes it's really hard to identify a clear-cut source. So that's why I've included a list here on the slide of the most frequent causes for back pain. And if you can remember the trigger for your last issue, please select it among on the list, share it in the chat. And if you've never experienced back pain, you can even share, other reasons or number 5, or that you haven't. So I'm just looking here and we can see some of the answers are from losing weight, a significant amount of weight, having stress, effects of posture, sitting at the dining room, so perhaps working from home. And then we have, you know, physical activity, again, more of that posture, and perhaps overexerting ourselves during training. So absolutely, these are all, of course, as we can see, common reasons. And it's interesting to see the experiences that some or most of us share regarding back pain, how it's triggered. There are a vast amount of reasons that we could get back pain, right? And this just really highlights the importance of prioritizing our spine health. And in order to do that, it's important and valuable to understand the spine, you know, its structures and its functions. So that's why we're going to do a quick overview of the anatomy of the spine so that we can better visualize how to protect our backs. And I'm seeing just another answer here about, you know, jogging, running, biking, skiing moguls, right? So that's definitely a bit of high impact activity there, and a lot of physical activity. So it does take a toll, right, over time. So let's look at these spinal structures. So unfortunately, I don't believe you can see my mouse over the slide. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's why I've included a lot of pictures. So this is a side view of the spine on the left-hand side. Oh, thank you, Maya. So you cannot see my mouse, but that's okay. I've added animations wherever I can. So you can see on the left image, it's a side view of our spine, and it's showing that it's made of more than 24 bones stacked one on top of the other. And the bone at the top, that's closest to the head, is what's called the atlas, and that's because it carries the weight of the skull. And then we've got individual bones grouped together, one on top of the other, to create our vertebral column, and they're in kind of segments. So the top segment is called the cervical spine. It's made of 7 bones, and they create our neck bones, or the C-spine. And then right underneath that, in the middle here, in the beige, is going to be 12 chest level bones, or for our thorax. That's why it's called the thoracic spine. Underneath that, in the blue, we can see 5 lower back bones, which create our lumbar spine. And right underneath the lumbar spine at the bottom, we've got our sacrum, which is actually made of 4 fused bones. So they're kind of like stuck together. And underneath that, we've got our coccyx, otherwise known as the tailbone. Okay, so that's just a broad overview of what the spine looks like. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, we can see that we've taken, you know, 3 different images, one vertebrae of each segment of the spine. So we've got a cervical vertebra, a thoracic vertebra, and then the lumbar vertebra. Don't feel it's easier for me to say this than be done, but try not to feel overwhelmed by this. It's simply just show you the differences of size in certain aspects of each vertebra from different spine regions. So for example, we can see the red box here that I've added shows how our cervical vertebrae have smaller vertebral bodies than the lumbar vertebrae do. And there's a reason, there's a method to that madness, right? Our lumbar vertebrae have to be able to support the weight of our body when we're standing up due to the effects of gravity. So we're going to need that larger kind of base to support that weight. Okay, so I'm going to just zoom in. So this is the same picture as the lumbar vertebrae. It's just a zoomed in version, okay? So we're looking again at a transverse section of a vertebral body from our low back, okay? So just one of our spine bones, I could say in layman terms. But this time on the top, we've got an intervertebral body. So in between each of these vertebrae, we've got a little jelly sac. We can think of it like that, okay? And this is a picture of what the jelly sac looks like. Okay, so in the middle of our intervertebral disc is is a liquid bag. It's called a nucleus pulposus. Doesn't really matter. Just think of it as a jelly bag, and it's surrounded by a bunch of rings, and they're called an annulus fibrosus. Kind of looks like an onion. Okay, so basically the purpose here of this onion ring is to keep this jelly bag in the middle of our vertebral disc. And then this disc is made of cartilage, which is a rubber-like material, and it's also got water. All right, and the cartilage plays a really important role in resisting rotational and loading forces. And then that jelly bag also has an important role because it functions as a shock absorber. So we've got one of these discs in between all our little spine vertebrae, okay? And we can already see why they're important and why we need them to be as healthy as possible. Okay. So moving forward, when we look at the application of these intervertebral discs, these blue discs in between our vertebrae, essentially they have elasticity that allows spine motion to occur. All right. So this slide shows two photos that's still looking at the lumbar spine from the side view. So the back is going to be where those bony prominences are, and then the front of the spine is where it looks, smooth downwards, okay? So our first picture on the left is showing what the spine looks like when you bend forward. So think about bending forward would be standing upright, facing forward, and you're bringing your head towards your knees. That's forward flexion. And when this happens, our discs have a tendency to bulge out in the back, which is highlighted on the picture by a red circle, okay? And this bulging is a reaction to compression forces that happen at the front of the spine. And then conversely, on the second picture to the right, this is going to show what happens to our spine when we bend backwards. So it would be the opposite. It would be spinal extension. So when I'm standing facing forward and I bring my top of my head towards my shoulder blades of my back. Okay, so when this happens, our intervertebral discs, those blue discs, they don't bulge, but those bony structures located behind the discs, which are called our facet joints, they can actually experience some compression stress if there's too much back bend, because they can start to kind of rub together, as you could imagine. So these are all reasons why maintaining the natural curve of our spine is really, really healthy and beneficial. It's going to help place less stress on the spine, and it's also going to position our body to generate more strength. And this is a great illustration and explanation to emphasize why a good personal trainer or fitness instructor or whoever is coaching you, why they always say neutral spine, neutral spine. This is why. This helps to see why. So as I mentioned, when our body's spine flexes forward, so that's any motion of bringing, the head towards the knees or knees to chest, that's forward flexion, it's going to create tension on our spine structures. And these spine structures also experience tension when our spine turns or rotates. So we're going to talk about two main forces that are exerted on our spine, and that would be compression forces and shear forces. So shear forces place stress vertically on the spine, okay, as we could see with that little animation there. And then, so that would really be, giving less space to the structures by squishing or compressing them. So it's in the name, right? And then we have our shear forces, which is when there's stress horizontally on the structures. So this happens when a force makes the vertebrae slip or slide on top of each other while its surrounded structures are stressing to keep them aligned. Okay, so let's look at each of these. Let's unpack each of these forces a little bit further using a neutral spine, of course. So we'll start with the compression forces. So this is, again, the same picture, side view of the spine. The back would be with the bony prominences, and the front of the body is where it's nice and smooth in the front. So when it comes to compression forces, that squeezing of those discs, the National Institute of Occupational Health and Safety actually was able to provide a limit set for low back compression force, and that limit is 3,300 newtons. We don't often use newtons in common conversation. So just to provide some context, a 3,300 Newton force is the equivalent of 725 pounds of compression. And that's really, it's quite amazing how much stress the lower back structures can take. But there seems to be a limit to how much accumulated stress our back can handle. And research labs have actually tested how well our spine structures can handle that repetitive force. So essentially, they've taken healthy segments of spines, put them in a compressor, and then the spines receive repetitive compressions of 3,000 newtons. Okay, so examples of motions that cause low back forces of 3,000 newtons or more are if you're touching your toes while standing up, and if you're doing a sit-up. Those are going to exert 3,000 newtons or more of compression forces. So that's what they simulated in the lab. And then they simulated that 3,000 Newton load for 5,000 times. And that caused the discs to finally herniate. Okay, so these experiments can highlight how, repetitive spinal flexion can lead to progressive spine damage and eventually a disc herniation. And herniated discs are most common in middle age, especially between 35 and 45 years old. And that's likely the result of accumulated damage over the years from, repeatedly flexing our spines, bending over with poor posture, sitting with poor posture, things like that. So it all, translates into real life here. Pardon me, I'm just admitting a few people. Thank you for your patience here. Okay. So now we're going to address, that second type of force, that shear force. Okay. So when someone who is standing leans forward, the weight of their upper body is going to create a shear force on the structures of the low spine. Okay. So to limit the limit of low back shear force to prevent back injury has been estimated to be about 500 newtons, and that's 112 pounds. Again, that's quite a significant amount of weight, right? Good news, of course, is that, well, sorry, good. Yeah, there is good news and bad news, of course. The bad news is that, exposure to higher shear forces, of course, it's going to place us at risk of back injury, but there's good news that we can minimize shear force that's placed on our low back under two main conditions. So the first one is going to be to, again, preserve the natural curve of our low spine, meaning that our lower back does not become rounded when we lean forward. And then also if a person's body weight is supported, that's going to minimize shear forces. So for example, take someone who's standing up and they place one arm on a table in front of them when they lean forward with their upper body. That can eliminate shear force and protect the low back. Okay. So let's put this a little bit more into practice with an example. So let's take a bent over row. This is a common exercise that a lot of us would have seen in the gym when they were open. Perhaps you're still practicing this at home, but taking a bent over row. So in the first picture on the left, we can see the person executing the exercise with a round low back. Okay, we can see that red arch in their low back. And that creates roughly 1,900 newtons of shear force on our spine structures. So it's not only putting a lot of stress on your spine, but we could easily minimize this using correct posture during this movement. So on the right-hand side, we can see, a quick fix to minimizing and greatly reducing the shear load on the spine is just to adopt a neutral spine, which just means that we are maintaining the natural curve of our lumbar spine. And that reduces it to 200 newtons of shear force. So it's well below the recommended limit. So it's important to note that this strategy can not only be used for weightlifting, but everyday activities. Okay, so it's going to be so helpful to be mindful during all of these activities that we're when you drop a pen on the floor, next time you drop something and you go to pick it up, bring your attention to how you're picking it up. Were you just bending forward and like completely, arching your back, or are you, keeping that low, that natural neutral low back curvature, and, starting to incorporate more of your knees and your hips, whenever you're tying your shoes, sitting and standing up from a chair, cutting food at the counter, brushing your teeth, the list is endless. So it can play a huge role in injury prevention for preserving our healthy spine structures, just by bringing our attention and being cognizant of how we're bending over to pick things up. So let's look a little more at, potential injuries that can be incurred from these repetitive spinal flexion motions, okay, before we look at some more of the strategies. So here we're looking at a side view of the spine again. And I know the photo has been flipped, so I just want to make it clear that now the left-hand side of the image is the front of your body, and then the right-hand side of the image is your back. So the posterior of your body, where the bony prominences are. So the first disc that we can see on the left-hand side at the top is a normal disc. Okay, and then right underneath that, we've got an example of a degenerated disc. Underneath that one, a bulging disc. And we can see why it's called a bulging disc. It literally bulges out the back towards where our spinal cord would be. Okay, and then moving towards the image on the right, we can see a fully herniated disc. So that's where that bulge has it looks like it's almost exited. It looks like a little balloon, and that's where our spinal cord would be. Okay, so we can see why a herniated disc, would be so painful. The bulge is pressing out into where a spinal cord, a spinal nerve would be exiting from that spinal canal. Okay, and then the discs that are above and or below a herniated disc always have a greater risk of being herniated. So we can see that the one underneath this herniated disc is a thinning disc. Okay, so that's obviously that's bad news, but there is good news with this one too. Any individuals that do have a degenerated disc or a bulging disc can actually use strategies to prevent future herniations. And there is research in vivo, so in humans, that's identified that people who protect their back after they've caused damage to some of the layers, they can actually experience regeneration to some of those damaged layers. So you can actually regenerate and almost rehabilitate your back if you've caused damage there. So that's the good news. Let's take a bird's eye view of what I've showed you here. So usually in class, I would have, a spine, a fake spine to show you. So these pictures are going to have to suffice. And I didn't mention, but please ask questions as they come up by raising your hand, and I can certainly answer them. So this is just a bird's eye view of what we were looking at. Okay, going from normal to disc bulge to a herniation to a disc fragment extravasation. So with the normal disc, this is really, again, just to highlight, we looked at this earlier. We've got the jelly bag in the center. It's held in tight by those onion rings. And it's a normal, healthy vertebral disc, right? It's intact. And then going to the second illustration where we can see that bulging disc, that jelly bag is no longer kept in its central position because some of those onion rings are broken, and repetitive compressions that are created by spinal flexion motions, over time, they're going to push the jelly bag backwards so often that it starts to break the layers of the onion. I should say annulus fibrosis, but that onion ring, right? And people don't normally feel pain at this point because these broken layers don't have a nerve supply. However, some people might feel, low back discomfort in the morning, but it's not as common. Okay, and an interesting fact here is that during sleep, water is going to enter our vertebral discs, so that in the morning they're full of water, and that explains why we are normally taller in the morning, about 1 to 3 centimeters taller. It's because that water enters the spine throughout the night. And in the case where someone has a weakened disc, the discomfort can often be felt in the morning from that water pressure because it creates a larger disc bulge. It's going to, add more pressure to that. As we spend time in an upright position, seated, standing, walking, whatever during the day, the disc starts to lose a very good percentage of the water, and discomfort usually tends to go away or be reduced. So that I always found that was very interesting. And it's why we often have more back pain in the morning. So the third illustration here represents a completely herniated disc. So this is that bird's eye view, so we can see a little bit further how, the content of the jelly bag is released outside the onion rings, and it compresses the adjacent spinal nerve. So obviously that's going to hurt a lot. Direct pressure on a nerve hurts a lot. And at this point, unfortunately, the damage is irreversible, and usually an individual would be experiencing severe pain for about 6 months. And then it would gradually get better. And surgery is rarely beneficial in this case, and does not shorten the recovery period. And then the fourth illustration, as I mentioned, is an extravasation, which is just a leakage of fluid from that jelly sac. And this one, of course, extremely painful. And they often require surgery to remove that extravasated chunk of disc. Fortunately, it's not a very common occurrence, and the extravasated tissue usually shrinks in size, and it will move so that it doesn't compress the nerve anymore. But in a nutshell, these are the injuries that can result from repetitive spinal flexion without preserving that natural curve of the lumbar spine. And someone shared, they were just emphasizing in the chat here how important it is, of course, to be bending correctly. So, and it all comes with awareness, right? So that's what we're here for. So now that we have that broad understanding of the anatomy of the spine and those compression and shear forces that are exerted on our spines during particular movements, let's put it into practice. So I have a question for you. Which of these two postures is going to exert higher forces on the lumbar spine, so our low back? Is it option A, where you're standing upright holding a load with your elbows bent, or is it going to be option B, where the person is not holding anything but they're just flexed forward 30 degrees? So I invite you to share your answers in the chat, A or B. We'll just give it a few moments. So far we're seeing a lot of B as the answer. Great, another B. So I'm going to, great, another B. Wonderful. All right. So thank you so much for participating. I understand it's not anonymous, so it's actually more similar to what we'd have in a classroom setting, right? The answer is that these two postures are almost exactly the same in terms of how much compression forces they're exerting. Okay, so I understand that we just went from our simple photo to a graph with a bunch of words and colors, but orient yourselves to these blue boxes. Those are the positions that were asked in the question. So position A, where they're standing with the box and elbows bent. The compression forces on the lumbar spine, so the light purple bar, it's almost at 2 there. And for position B, which is the second blue box, 30 degrees of flexion, it's got almost the exact same amount of lumbar compression forces, which is that light purple box. They're both almost at the same level, which is surprising, right? Most of us, like I would have thought it was B. I had thought it was B as well, way back in the day, right? But it just helps to illustrate that simply bending forward without load is going to place stress on the spine. So well done for selecting B. At least you were aware that, yeah, for sure that one's going to be placing more stress on our backs. Okay, how about this one? Which exercise of these two is going to generate more shear force? So, oh no. Oh no. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
can hear you. Yes.
thank you. I just got booted off, so I'm back. You might have heard me say, "Oh, sugar." Okay, sorry for the interruption, everyone. We were in the midst of going through our second question here, so I apologize again. Thank you for your understanding. Right, which of these two exercises generates more shear force? And remember, shear force is what's being exerted almost more horizontally on our vertebral column. So we've got option A, where you are, say, lying on the ground, face down, arms and legs extended, and you're raising your arms and legs in an extension. And then we've got option B, which would be, our legs are braced, but we're still in that torso extension position. But we can see that from basically the hips down is the only part where you're braced. Everything else is against gravity. So I invite you to share your answers in the chat. We've already gotten a few, basically mixed bag of answers so far. Perfect. So I'll just wait a couple moments here as we get more responses. Yeah, so definitely we're getting a mix of answers, and that's almost what we were looking for, right? or I was looking for, so we can see both of them are definitely exerting forces on the spine. The answer here of which one generates more is going to be B. So the second exercise here, and that's because the person's body weight is not fully supported, right? There's only support from the legs down, and that's barely any. After that, they're working against gravity. And one of the best ways to minimize that shear force that we had talked about earlier was to have, your torso supported, because that's what's like your whole torso here in this exercise is not supported. So it's creating quite a bit of shear force, but not only that, compression forces are really high with this exercise as well. So along with repetitive sit-ups and hanging bent legs, so the Roman chair exercise where your legs are hanging and bent, the exercises on this slide, the torso extensions and the prone extensions, are not as recommended exercises because they go beyond the limit of the lower back compression force of 3,300 newtons. So we can see the one on the left here. It not only high shear forces, but compression forces as well. And then the one on the right has even more compression force. So usually it's trunk flex motions that bring most of those compression forces to the spine. But this is showing that back extension motions can also bring really high compression forces to the spine structures. And trunk endurance and strengthening exercises done with the spine in a neutral position is going to be the solution to this, is going to generate less compression force. So another reason why it's important to pay special attention to preserving that natural curve of the low back. So very interesting to see here with that. On top of body weight exercises, fitness training equipment can also generate high compression forces. So one common one that we see in almost every gym is the one on the left here, the leg press. This one generates more than that 3,300 Newton recommended limit of forces on our low back. And that's because, we can see that we're losing that natural low back curve, and our core muscles aren't getting really activated to stabilize the spine. We're sitting in almost like a complete, I want to say fetal position, like you're so flexed, your knees are at your chest, right? So squat exercises would be a really healthy alternative exercise for these reasons. And what's great is, military or civilian, we all have access to the PSP fitness instructors in the NCR. If you're military, you do have, free access for a personalized training program. civilian, we can still attend the fitness classes. So that's really great. They can give us exercises to challenge our leg muscles while still protecting our spine, and the squat would be one of them. A second machine that's commonly used in gyms, even at home too, if you have a rower at home. This one, we need to be mindful of how we're using it and what strategies we're using to row. Hopefully we have some strategies, because this one can generate really high compression forces if we're not taking those precautions when we're using the rower, and it can put you at risk of a low back injury. So it's really important to learn the appropriate techniques to help with strengthening the back muscles while using a rower instead of weakening the back structures. So concept2.com actually has really great videos and techniques to show how to use a rower so that it's not detrimental to the spine. And again, those fitness instructors are a great resource as well. I'm just seeing a few entrances here in the chat saying that the image on the left is a yoga move. That's really great. Yeah, definitely a lot of yoga moves that are encouraging, stretching and flexion. This is really for in terms of adding external load and adding while you're not preserving that low back curve, so a neutral spine. So I don't know if that kind of targets your comment. Thank you for sharing. And then someone asked, why are these machines in use if we can easily go over the compression limit? It's a really great question. Actually, the leg press, I know for sure in the NCR, a lot of the gyms went through kind of like a phase where they were removing non-functional equipment. And it really goes back to this research is constantly, being finessed, and I should say polished, and it's constantly changing, right? So basically, it all comes with like how old your gym equipment is, what type of training you're doing, and it's not, I'm not going to say, we're never going to say like, don't do leg press, but there are always healthier alternative exercises. And it really comes down to how often you're doing them and repeating them, right? If all you're doing is leg press every day or every second day for 20 years, right? That can contribute to those spine injuries. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I totally hear what you're saying too. I used to be a fitness instructor and in Ottawa, and yeah, we went through that phase where we were trying to really just focus on those functional training machines and exercises. Oh, pardon me. Thank you for slide 18 is the yoga move, not slide 19. Okay, sorry about that. All right. So if you want to chat with me further about the machines and why they're there, definitely, like there's still even, the prone leg, the prone leg torso extension machines in a lot of gyms. There's the Roman chair. There's a lot of machines that aren't as functional in a lot of gyms, and a lot of it comes down to education, finances for sure. And I think that's why it's great that everyone here is present, because how would you know unless you weren't told, right? Cool. So moving forward from, exercise, it's not only exercise that we need to be mindful of this positioning of our spine, but also during sitting, right? How have you ever, counted the number of hours per day that you are seated? I haven't, sat down and calculated how long I'm seated for, but if I look at a regular day for a second, I'll just get you to reflect on it. A regular day, a consistent day in your life, are you seated for most of the day? Think about driving, sitting at your workstation, sitting to eat, sitting to watch TV or play on your computer or iPad or on your phone, sitting on a bench. That's a lot of sedentary time. So we can understand that we want to make sure that our seated posture is really good, because we're sitting for most of the day, right? And that inevitably could have a negative impact in the long term if we're not, being mindful of our posture. And that explains why a lot of us suffer from low back pain at least once in our life. It's it's gonna be there, right? So it's important that we bring our awareness to that. And even during walking as well. So all of this is going to contribute to reducing low back compression forces, and should be used as often as possible in our daily life and physical training. So one thing that we can do right away is to make sure that we have a lower back support, like a cushion or even rolling up a towel and positioning it in the low back. And that can make a really big difference on it, decreasing the stress on our spine structures and favoring that natural spine curve. So if you don't have, a lumbar support right now, I encourage you to literally roll up a towel and place it there across. And I'll definitely be including some resources that illustrate this as well for you at the end. Note that in, a regular military environment, I know a lot of us are working from home right now, but when we're in a military environment, we will need to be creative, but at least we normally have towels on deployment. So that can be used as well when, we're seated, and that sort of thing. Okay, so going into seated posture, if it's maintained for a long time, not only does it create spine problems, it can also weaken our core muscles, right? One research study that involved competitive volleyball players discovered that after sitting for 20 minutes on a bench, the players had a 20% decrease in their core strength compared to their core strength when they walked into the gym. So it doesn't take long to lose core strength, and this is explained by the fact that poor sitting posture, it stretches important back muscles, and then that prolonged stretch is going to weaken our muscles for periods of time. And if you observe closely enough, some, almost most competitive sports teams now, you'll notice that the players that aren't playing are going to stay standing up instead of sitting on a bench. And that can help extrapolate that poor posture can impact strength. They stay standing so that they almost stay ready, right? So it needs to be something that's considered with sports and physical activities. So here we're just showing, just a quick fix, a couple kind of tips and techniques that we can do, that have been recognized by a lot of research to help with maintaining good posture, are going to be making sure that your chair is adjusted to your body. This is really hard when we're working from home and we don't have access, directly to chairs at work, right? A lot of us have to get creative, if we haven't already. So we want to try our best to make sure that the height, depth, and width of our chair is fit to our body. That second tip, it goes back to making sure we've got that low back support. So in the first picture on the left, we can see that there's an arch in the low back, and then the picture on the right with the corrected posture, they've got that support in their low back, and that's really going to make a difference. And as soon as you adjust your low back posture, that's going to help mitigate any poor posture in the neck. It almost automatically adjusts your neck posture too. Having armrests is going to help, because you can rest your elbows on it, and that's going to relax your shoulders. So we're gonna practice this right now. Actually, I'm gonna still actually use this photo, but essentially what we're gonna do, and I'll go back to the slide that I just skipped in a moment, but we're gonna put this into practice. So if you're seated right now, or sorry, if you're not seated right now, I'll ask that you sit. Just so that we can practice this, to preserve our spine health while we're sitting. So first, you're going to pull your shoulders down and back so that you're not wearing them as earrings, right? So shoulders down and back, sit up straight, make sure that your back is supported. If it's not right now, that's okay. Just remember that that's something that we're going to do, right? And you want to pull your ears in line with your shoulders so they're sitting above your shoulders and not in front of them. And already you can feel that you're sitting up nice and tall, and you should feel a little bit better if you weren't sitting this way before. And when I say adjust the chair, it means that you want your thighs and hips to be supported and parallel to the floor. Ideally, you want to have both feet flat on the floor so that they are fully supported as well. If you need to get creative, I've put a textbook on the floor. I've put a pillow, like a nice firm pillow. I've put yoga blocks just so that my feet can be flat. and supported as well. And if you have armrests, again, those can be really helpful. You want to adjust them so that your elbows are 90 to 120 degrees bent and they're supported. I'm just seeing a few questions here, pardon me. Maybe you will discuss that later. Yep, we'll talk about planks and ab crunches in a moment. And then someone saying they have a stand-up desk, no chair at all. I do have a Swiss ball. Will that work? That's a really great question. Stand-up desk is always, you know, a really nice, I want to say, treat to have, especially at home. And I was just about to mention, so that's really great. You're leading me into my next point here. Switching between standing and sitting every hour is highly encouraged. So even if you don't have a stand-up desk, you want to try and switch your body positioning once an hour at least. So whether that's standing up, taking a small walk of 1 to 2 minutes, or stretching, that's going to make a huge difference for your spine. And you're going to feel it, right? Like we feel it. We're like, oh, I need to stand up. I need to stretch. So something that works for me at least, and a lot of other people, is to set an alarm. I'm serious, on your phone or on your Outlook or on your computer, whatever, just to stand up. Make it a habit. So every time you have a phone call, you stand for your phone call. So if you have a stand-up desk, no chair, using a Swiss ball, you know, they don't have lumbar support. So you want to just kind of find a balance with how long you're sitting with that Swiss ball. I know that they're encouraged to activate your core. That could be part of your core, you know, core strength and endurance training, is sitting on the Swiss ball, but just being mindful that there is no lumbar support with the Swiss ball. So for long periods of time, it won't be as beneficial as having a lumbar support on a chair. And I hope that answers the question. And for kneeling chairs, how about I will answer that question at the end, just to make sure I have enough time for the next couple slides. Thank you. So that is bringing us into, you know, our core training section. So really, you know, on top of adopting good posture to help reduce compression forces on the spine, we want to work on our spine strength and our spine stability. And the core actually includes, you know, muscles that stabilize the hip, muscles that make up our torso on the front, sides, and back of the body, as well as muscles that stabilize the shoulders. So it's not just our abdominal muscles. And that's why having core stability means having the ability to maintain ideal alignment of our neck, our spine, our shoulder blades, and our pelvis while we're performing exercise and sport, and also while we're seated and standing. And it means maintaining that natural curve of the lumbar spine. And in order to protect the back, ideally, we want to create, you know, 360 degrees stiffness around the spine as we perform these movements and transfer force throughout the body. And when we do this, we want to make sure that all of these core muscles are working in concert. They're working together. So I'm just going to go with our next slide here just to illustrate. Obviously, this is a really common exercise. It's not as common as it was before. For those who are not new to the calf, it was part of the old CF Express test, right? Doing sit-ups. And now it's not part of the force evaluation, which is good because it's more a reflection of functional movements and common military tasks. But when we're considering, you know, which exercises to use to develop that core strength and stability, forward flexing exercises, you know, bringing knees to chest where our lower back curve is lost, should be avoided. And that's because flexing our trunk, as I mentioned, is going to, while we're exerting ourselves or increasing, adding external load, is going to generate, you know, those compression forces that are in excess of that 3,300 Newton guideline limit. So doing this type of activity repeatedly, so again and again and again, is going to contribute to degeneration of our lumbar discs and significantly raise our risk of disc herniation. So for that reason, sit-ups, crunches, you know, hanging vertically with bent knee raises, or full trunk forward motions with straight legs are discouraged to be done repeatedly. So I'm just emphasizing the word repeatedly. Like, of course, you know, I'm not asking you to never do sit-ups again. Just be mindful that over time, repeatedly doing these again and again, it's going to have an effect on our back health. So on top of, you know, generating those high pressures in the low back, when these exercises are done repeatedly, they can also cause micro trauma. So that's just something to be mindful of as well, and that can accumulate and lead to more back problems. So instead of doing a sit-up, we can try a curl up. You know, if you love that motion and that feeling from a sit-up, try a curl up, which is illustrated on the right-hand side of this slide. It preserves the lumbar curve by simply extending, you know, the legs, one leg straight out completely, supporting the low back with the hands and not sitting up all the way. And so this is going to generate less compression force, and you're still going to be challenging your core. Some more, you know, if you're currently doing exercises that require a lot of repetitive trunk flexion motions or very extended positions, especially with the loss of that low back curve, I encourage you to contact, you know, fitness to find alternate exercises. And I'm going to share some more with you right now too. So here's a list of recognized exercises that minimize that stress on our spine structures while still offering, you know, a really good challenge for our core muscles. And they're known as the Stu McGill Big Three. It's named after Dr. Stuart McGill. He's a world-renowned spine biomechanist. He's an expert on back pain, back rehab, and injury resilience and performance. And I'll share his resource with you after the presentation as well, because it's proven to work. So, oh, I see that. Pardon me. Okay, I just had a little tech bubble there. So I already mentioned the curl up, which is at the bottom picture here. But the bird dog, this is a definitely, you know, a popular exercise where you raise a leg and the opposite arm. And it can be viewed as an easy exercise, but when the goal of this is to immobilize the trunk or not move the trunk at all, while you're moving your arm and leg, it can definitely be more challenging if you're focusing on that. And note that this exercise is at the limit of respecting the force guideline if it's well executed, and your low back curvature is preserved. And the second exercise would be a side plank. It's also a great challenge for all of our core muscles, in particular the transversus abdominis, so our side abdominal muscles. And then we've got the curl up. So all of these exercises can progress to more challenging ones. And I'm going to share actually with you, I'll share it right now. Or actually, I have it shared in the files for the chat. I'm also going to send a follow-up email with the resources to you, so they're in one spot. That might help make it feel more organized. But just a really nice little handout. It's a one-pager with the exercises on it and suggestions for reps and sets. Okay. So on top of that, what else can we do? We've got the new 24-hour movement guidelines that was released by CSEP. It offers really clear direction on what a healthy 24 hours looks like. So on top of, you know, the strategies that I've presented to you today, the Stu McGill Big Three are posture and, you know, picking up items with a neutral spine. We've got reducing sedentary time. So I did talk a little bit about taking standing breaks, but on top of that, we want to reduce our sedentary screen time. So that comes with replacing, you know, TV watching or playing on the iPad or the phone or whatever with going for a walk or stretching or listening to a podcast while you're walking on a treadmill or you're cycling or cycling outside, right? So getting creative. Luckily for us, better weather is going to come after today. So it'll be easier to do that, but it's important to start thinking about ways that we can incorporate these behaviors into our day-to-day and sustain them. Sleep, of course, has become popular and sexy. It was always really important, but now it's becoming more, talked about, which is really great. Set yourself up for 7 to 9 hours a night of good quality sleep if that's what works for your body. Make it a priority, add it to your to-do list, and I have some sleep resources for you as well. And of course, moving more goes with reducing sedentary time, but with moving more, it means standing. Standing is going to be great. Switching positions throughout your day, trying to get your heart rate up every day for, 20 to 30 minutes in bouts of 10 minutes or more, right? So just those quick walks, brisk walks, bike riding, whatever suits you. Do what you like, because that's gonna be what you carry forward and you continue to do. And I'll share these movement guidelines with you as well, as a follow-up. This is just a recap slide. So essentially, everything I said, we want to keep stress away from our low back structures and be mindful of our posture and how we're bending forward to pick things up or reaching back. Try to keep them aligned whenever we're accepting external load or adding weight. So before you add weight to any exercise, make sure that your posture is perfected first, right? Bracing the core, adopting that neutral spine posture as often as possible. Even if you just practice doing this while you're walking, you're going to feel a difference. And then again, participating in regular physical activity. I'm going to share these resources with you in our follow-up email, so I don't want you to feel rushed to jot any down. And here's our final kind of recap slide. Thank you so much for participating and joining today. I'm going to go through the chat at the very end here just to make sure I answer all of the questions, and I encourage you to stay back to ask any more questions if you have time. I also invite you to participate in our feedback survey just to help us better our webinar experiences and the structure of our webinars. It takes 2 to 3 minutes. So I've just added the link in the chat for our feedback survey. It's going to be open for 24 hours for you to complete. So that's really appreciated, and thank you in advance for doing that. I also want to mention again, a plug for the fitness team. They have classes during COVID. They have a lot of really great resources, especially for working from home. And their website is accessible, through hours. Oh, I see that my little URL for my website is cut off there, but it's calfconnection.ca/ncr/health promotion. We also have our annual pedometer challenge back this year. So that's a really great way to keep ourselves accountable for physical activity every day. There are a lot of really amazing prizes this year. So I encourage you to check out the pedometer challenge, register a team. It's a great way to, build camaraderie and connect with each other during COVID as well, and to get some extra steps in. Okay, so I'm going to go through the questions here. I'm going to turn my camera back on so you can see me. Okay, so I'm going to go through the questions, and if you have to go, thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have a great day and you stay warm. It's still snowing where I am in Ottawa. Okay. So how about kneeling chairs? Are they recommended? So I am not familiar with the kneeling chairs and the recommendations on those, but I can definitely check back in with you regarding that. So I can ask our research team about the kneeling chairs. And we've got a sports med doctor and a physiotherapist as, our subject matter experts for the injury prevention active living cells. So I can definitely ask them about kneeling chairs and get back to you with an answer, because I don't know personally. So I'm going to make note of that and I'll contact you directly. And then I hope that's okay. I hope that you can wait for the answer. And then someone's just sharing, I tried a Swiss ball while working from home and found my lower back getting sore after a short while. Is there posture guidance for its use? So for that question, I'm going to say, there's no low back support for the Swiss ball, right? So, so the 3 kind of strategies to help minimize stress while we're sitting. One of them was to have low back support to help preserve that natural low spine curvature. So the guidance for that would be, if there's no low back support, it's not going to be as beneficial to help minimize the stress. I know that sometimes they sell those Swiss ball chairs that have a low back support, so that might be more beneficial for you. And if you want more information on the Swiss ball while working from home, I do have a really great resource from Occupational Health and Safety. This is a really great web page that they have. I encourage you to check it out. And it's all about, what to do, what to look for when working in a sitting position, what to avoid while sitting, things like that. And I think that might contain the answers that you're looking for with regards to the Swiss ball. If not, please feel free to contact me directly. I'm just going to share my email address in here. Okay. Another question here is, if I plank facing down, keeping the spine straight, does it put a strain on the spine? So are you asking if, it's really hard for me because I can't see your first name, so I apologize. I believe the last name is Grasa or Graca. Would you feel free to unmute your mic and, oh, Patricia, thank you, Patricia. Are you comfortable with unmuting your mic to ask the question and elaborate, or typing it out?
Sure. So it's when you're planking facing down, and you are on your elbows. I'm
Yep.
just wondering if I keep my back really, really straight as possible as I can, if that's going to put a strain on my back, on my spine.
Okay, I understand your question. Thank you for unmuting yourself. So, of
Thank you.
course, there's going to be the force of gravity bearing down on you. If you don't have any kind of medical advice that's advised, so if you're not medically advised, if you're advised not to do the plank, don't do the plank by a doctor or a physiotherapist or healthcare professional. But if you're clear to do it, it's a safe exercise to do. You're going to be impacted by gravity, right? Like that's the force that's bearing you down. You don't want your spine to be straight. You want to preserve the natural curve. I don't know if that's what you mean by straight, but a neutral spine. So if you're doing that, there's going to be the force of gravity. I'm not sure if you mean, is there going to be a lot of shear and compression forces?
No, just the weight of the body, really, just the normal plank.
Okay, well, as long as you're not advised not to do it by a healthcare professional, it should be safe for you. I can't speak directly though, because I don't know you, or I can't see you, you know what I mean? So I can't necessarily recommend an exercise, but the safest, least, the exercises that place the least amount of stress on your spine are going to be those Stu McGill big three: the side plank, the curl up, and the bird dog. The bird dog is kind of, you're in almost a plank position, but you're in the quadruped position. So you're going to be working on bracing the core during that activity. Similar, not the same, but similar to you would as the front plank. But the front plank is still, a really great full body core exercise. It's just not, it's a little more stress than the other one. Okay, thank you for the question. I hope you got the answer.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and thanks for the wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. I'm just going to hang back for 5 more minutes in case there are any leftover questions. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, everyone. And is that you that's asking about the shoulders and C-spine?
Yes, it's me.
Oh, I can't see your first name,
Hi.
and I was like, is that
Yeah.
Anne?
Oh, right. Yeah, yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, I find I was doing all those mission fitness classes and the workouts, and so I was doing a lot more upper body stuff. And I have a bit of a shoulder problem anyway, but it got it it got a lot worse like a week ago, and my neck is so sore, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to go to see a doctor, but it's just with all this COVID stuff, who wants to go to a doctor, right?
Absolutely.
But
Oh my
yeah, so
gosh,
I'm
it
just
must be
wondering,
so
because I know a lot of
painful.
the stuff we talk about is lower back, because that tends to be where people mostly have the issues. But I'm just wondering if there's, like, with the resources that you're going to give us, and that, is there anything specific to like shoulders and necks?
Yeah, so for the ones that I'm giving, it's really like full core for the Stu McGill Big Three, and then I've got like some neck stretches that are nice for, working at the desk, like those desk stretches. And then one of the handouts is an ergonomic. It's really like it's an ergonomic pamphlet that's the digital version, and it shows you exactly how to adjust every part of your workstation so that your whole spine is supported and stabilized. So that
Yeah.
might be really helpful. It was you who mentioned about the Swiss ball, right?
Yeah, I heard, and you know what? I never use the Swiss ball really. I put it in the office because I have no chair, and I find with the stand-up desk, I never look to sit down. I just stand up all day at my workstation, and then if I take breaks, maybe I'll sit down to have a coffee or something.